Thank you. It's good to be here. It's almost been 20 years since I've been a Unitarian Universalist, so I'm not new to UUism at all, and I'm currently I just applied for the Southern Region's field consultant position for the Southern Region. So I'm hoping they send me an email and say, Christopher, you've been hired, service down here in the South, and we'll keep rocking and rolling. What I do have on my resume is very intimate and cozy relationships with several churches in the South: Valdosta, Georgia, the Charlottesville, Virginia Church, and the Memphis, Tennessee Church, the Church of the River, right down on the beautiful river. So, thank you, sir.
Yeah, it's small, but you got glasses on.
Yeah, I can see this. I got my specs on. But before I jump into this poem, I love sharing personal experiences. Yesterday, David, Teresa, and myself were at Surly
Brewing, Oktoberfest.
Yeah, we were there. You know, we're going to put our business out there. We were there, and Teresa asked me, amidst dozens and dozens of white folk, Christopher, what does it feel like to be maybe the only person of color or black person? And she walks in the room there. So I'm putting you on the spot, Teresa.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So Teresa asked me, what does it feel like to be like the only black person in a room with dozens and dozens and dozens of white folk, or in a place where there aren't many people of color, or maybe just like Portland, Oregon, where I formerly lived some years back, the people of color, or especially the black people, live way away from all kinds of resources and fun and all that good stuff. So I told Teresa that I'm born and raised in Rockford, Illinois. I'm from Rockford, right in between Madison and Chicago. Even when I was 8 or 9 years old, I was at schools that were maybe 3% black or Latino, people of color. So since I was 8 or 9 years old, I've had that experience. So I think even early on, my education prepared me for what I'm doing now. I don't feel at all uncomfortable being in spaces where I'm the only black person or a person of color. Yeah, and that feels weird even saying. And I think people forget, or maybe we don't. There are places in this country where a black person or a person of color might not be seen at all. So that kind of gives me some comfort and some proximate understanding. So even my middle school, Eisenhower Middle School, east side of Rockford, Illinois, where actually my family lives not too far from, when I was there probably weren't no more than 5% people of color at Eisenhower Middle School. So all of my life, I've mostly been in a lot of settings where I was not, if I wasn't the only black person or person of color, I was a part of a few. So trying to click this phone here, David. I might need your
Did it go to sleep?
Yeah. So I'm good, man. And I told Teresa that the only thing that would be messed up about the situation if I felt unsafe being in these spaces, and I don't. I'm very calm. I'm very focused, and I'm a people person.
All right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You talk to people. That is very cool.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as long as I got those things going for me, I do some yoga, some stretching in the morning. I work out. I'm usually jovial. So I'm good. I'm good wherever I am. And I'm fortunate for that. I'm thankful for that. So with that said, I'm jumping into Black Man's Prayer before entering spaces with white people. Try to pace myself going through this. Dear God, Universe, Allah, please protect me, give me guidance as I enter these spaces with white folk who might be scared, nervous, uncomfortable, or even feel as if everything belongs to them, belongs to them, belongs to them. That includes the streets I walk on, the neighborhoods I stroll into, the health facilities I work out in, the churches I step into, the airports I get myself to. Dear Goddess, God, Allah, Universe, Great Spirit, may they understand I'm just a man who is placed here living without worry or fear. Year after year after year, I'm becoming more confident, brave, at peace with myself, at peace with myself. May they understand, dearest divine forces, their streets, their neighborhood, their gym is mine too, is mine too, is mine too. They create the fear when they say or do the things that they do. They do. Oh, dearest divine forces, I don't want no problem with them or the police. They may call when they see me walking through their pristine blocks, listening to hip hop, listening to hip hop in my earphones. I'm just trying to exercise, breathe, make it back home, make it back home, make it back home, make it back home. I'm a black man trying to make it back home. We need love and safety at home. I'm a black man saying peace, shalom, peace, shalom, peace, shalom. And that's that poem.
Thank you. Yeah, great.
Thank you. And I want to write a version 2 or a version 3 of that poem because there's so much more to say. I've had some recent experiences where, yeah, I could write. Even I live in Memphis, Tennessee now. I'm wrapping up a degree in organizational leadership, professional studies. I only have 27 credit hours left. So it was my turn to get back after a storied career of doing this very same thing. And I'm walking through some very well-to-do, high-end neighborhoods in Memphis, Tennessee, either walking or riding my bike. But for some reason, I feel even more at home there than I do, let's say, Rockford, Illinois, or Minneapolis, Minnesota. Memphis just breathes welcome right now. It really does. It's not like, look at him, that black dude, or look at her, that Latino girl, or look at her, that indigenous woman. Memphis says, welcome, you belong here right now. And I'm thankful and fortunate for that. And actually, before I began my student history at the University of Memphis, I was going to school. I was in school in Mississippi, and Mississippi is kind of still the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mississippi is still like 1950s, 1960s Mississippi. Yeah. You can feel it. You can see it. You can tell a Mississippian from a Tennessean or a Memphian immediately. Yeah, and when I was in school in Mississippi, we used to travel to Memphis a lot. So even before I went to school there, I was already familiar with Memphis, the neighborhoods, a variety of things. So I like Memphis a lot, and I think Memphis likes me too. Thank you, Memphis, Tennessee. I love you too. You sip on some tea here. But even thinking about, there's a juice bar there, and I find it's in the Cooper Young, the very famous Cooper Young neighborhood in Memphis, and I'm in that neighborhood a lot now. I cut through there to get to downtown, into Midtown, of course, where Cooper Young is, and I strike up conversations with like maybe young white women. It's no thing. It is no thing. Everything is all good. It's all good. So even when we might point our fingers at the South and say, you did bad, they're making up for it. Big time. And David has spent a lot of time in the South. David is from Southern Illinois. And David, what would you say your last experience with being in Memphis? What did it feel like?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, Memphis has always been interesting. I mean, because it was, Tennessee was a border state. And so it's just down the Mississippi from where, I grew up. And it's always been interesting that way because Sun Records was there. The blues were coming up out of the Delta, which is not pretty, by the way. But because there's such respect. I mean, when I was living around there, I mean, the members of the Rolling Stones would come flying in just to listen to these old black guys right out of the Delta because they can play guitar. It sounds like 3 guitars at once. So this acoustic blues that they do and the finger picking stuff. So there's great respect for the black tradition, even though Elvis Presley and, and that kind of thing stole, and took it to white radio, right? Without credit. But there's always been this real blending there, I think. And going to, on Beale Street, hanging out at the B.B. King barbecue, and, just a great mixture of cultures, and white people, black people, people from all over the world come in to hear the music, and yeah. Awesome. So it's a different place, yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
It ain't Mississippi.
Yeah, somebody needs to do something about Mississippi. And actually, I lived in Alabama maybe a couple years ago now, maybe even less than that. And Alabama feels like Mississippi too. So.
Oh yeah. Race to the bottom. Race to the bottom.
Yeah. And I want to give my folks credit, and especially Alabama, who are doing some really good work, especially in the cities of Mobile, Daphne, and Fairhope. They're really doing some good work, but Alabama still feels like Alabama. It does. So I'm thinking about inequity, inequality. The UUs are addressing these issues pretty quickly these days. A lot of us are addressing white supremacy, especially. We're talking about multiple issues dealing with, especially racial and economic inequality or inequity. I just left the UUJEC. I was their administrator for a while, and that was our work to address economic inequity, especially, or inequality.
UUs for a just economic community.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah.
Unitarian Universalists for a Just Economic Community is UUJEC. So I was their administrator for a year. And man, I got very proximate with economic inequity and economic inequality in a way that made me search for organizations and companies or nonprofits who are doing some very great work. And like the Democracy Collective is one of them. And there's Next, if you check out nextcity.org is one of them. They're doing some beautiful work around economic inequality or equity, but we're talking about those issues in regards to progressive spaces. So I want to open this up. A show of hands if you know of or are part of organizations in Minnesota or Minneapolis or St. Paul that's doing some very good racial or economic inequity or inequality work. Okay, got a few. And can I hear some of the names of those organizations, companies, or nonprofits?
Communities United Against Police Brutality.
I've heard of them. Okay. Anybody, gentlemen?
Democratic Socialists of America, Twin Cities chapter.
Awesome.
Yeah.
David.
Yeah, I'm a member of a think tank that is all about trying to figure out how to keep people of color, professionals who move in. We heard from Deshaun last week, and it's a real problem. We recruit all over the world, and people come in to work at the big corporate headquarters, and they don't see people like themselves, and they leave. And I think the stat is within 3 years, almost every person of color hired leaves. And we have to stop that for various reasons. We have to stop that. And so the downtown business community is sponsoring this think tank. I'm on it because I'm a liberal minister, but there are also business leaders, Target, et cetera. And so they're really trying to address it, but it's a heck of a problem.
Sunrise Bank, which is a B Corp, and my branch on Washington has a lot of people of color bankers.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Let me ask you all this. Have any people of color that you know in Minneapolis or St. Paul or Minnesota in general, do any of them do they feel threatened or unsafe in your all's communities anywhere?
When it comes to the police, they're very threatened.
Oh, right. Right. But outside of the police.
I live out in Stillwater, and I belong to some arts. I'm an artist, and I belong to some arts groups, and I have over the years. And friends of mine that have some amount of color, even light, even vaguely different, are a little afraid to come out there. They think about it, and they don't want to leave too late. you know, and it didn't really dawn on me how intense that was, but that's fairly, in this day and age, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, and this was before this Trump era, too, that this happened.
Even before the Trump era. That's too bad. Did I see a hand right here?
Yeah, a friend of mine and I used to walk around now but in Makaska. And we were joking one day because it was very icy, and so we were joking about falling down and cracking our heads and going unconscious on the ice and what would happen to us. Well, and I said, I don't know, because I don't ever carry ID around the lake, and I would, somebody would discover me and then have to figure it out. He said, oh, I always carry ID in that, he just always carries it. So it was, and I never thought about it.
And he's, of course, a person of color.
Yeah, he's a person of color. Yep.
Yeah.
And then we joked further, and he kind of said, yeah, well, I'm sure they would think that I pushed you down or something.
Oh, man.
Right?
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah, myself, I travel a lot, so I definitely keep my identification, but I don't. Yeah, subconsciously, I don't think about that, but we definitely have to keep our ID and make sure that we're represented in that kind of way. Yeah. Oh, back here.
I was just going to say that I think what that story illuminates is that it's not that people of color feel safe. It's just that they don't tell us if they don't feel safe. It's like, it just so happened, she was able to glean that in a conversation, but it's not like we would know. Once I'm a teacher, and I was talking to some parents outside of the school in their car, and another car had to wait for 2 seconds in a school zone and yelled at the N-word, and went around, and I was just like, whoa, in a school zone, like what? So there are definitely times when it comes up, but, I think even if we have friends who are black, we're very sheltered from really seeing it or hearing it, unless they feel comfortable enough with us to tell us, and most of the time, they don't.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump back to being with David and Teresa, and they've been my hosts, since I've been coming back, and even thinking about being with them, I'm with two white folk, and of course that helps me feel more comfortable and more safe. But even if I wasn't with them, I would still be okay. But it definitely helps, but also David and Teresa's consciousness is on a level that helps me feel even more comfortable. If y'all can understand that. I mean, we're always talking about issues of race or inequity or inequality. So even that conversation, even if we're drinking a beer together, to have that kind of dialogue is important. Especially in this, the dude that's in the White House, in his era right now, that's helpful, and if you can have conversations with the people of color that you might be with or hang around, that makes us feel more calm and at ease, and that you understand and that you get it. Kathy, who's sitting in front here with the nice blue sweater, we were at a conference this summer in South Dakota. Kathy, and you and I haven't shared any emails about that conference deeply since then, but what did you get a sense after that conference, after we were all together in that very multicultural setting?
The conference is sponsored by the International Institute for Transformative Collaboration, and it's a Lakota-led effort to try to get people together to explore how we can be together and how we should be relating to the planet. And so one of the things that really stuck with a lot of those of us who were white is that Johnny Azarman, who was leading it, said, okay, all you white people, you're going to sit over here and you're going to be the panel, and all the indigenous folks and people of color get to ask you questions. And so it was kind of like a total reversal of the way it often is. And it was interesting. And like, so why do you people not care about your family and your roots? And it's like, well, yeah, most of us came from somewhere else, and, we never had any track of it. And, so someone jokingly, can I touch your hair? Do we get to ask any questions we want to all weekend long? And then so it's just a total shift of the mind.
Great.
And Kathy, did you get any perspectives of any new knowledge or information in regards to inequity or inequality from out there at conference?
Oh, wow. For a lot of the indigenous folks, just being able to have enough money for gas to get from Pine Ridge to Rapid City is a huge deal.
Right.
I mean, the poverty on the reservations is extreme. And in my previous dealings with a lot of people in the group, the people who can talk about their experiences with having been taken from their families at age 5, don't speak any English, and now you're in a boarding school where they say you're not allowed to speak Lakota. The number of people who've dealt with chemical dependency problems, it's heartbreaking. It's just a completely different point of view than I think most of us who live in largely white circles would ever get.
Kathy, you should introduce yourself. I don't know if everyone knows you. Yeah.
I'm Kathy Burek. I'm a member of Michael Sabitas Unitarian Society, and I'm also a member of the UUA Board of Trustees.
Yeah. So you have seen firsthand what we have been trying to do, slowly and sometimes erratically and fitfully, and et cetera. So yes, I mean we were down in New Mexico, right? I remember we were doing one of the GAs. Remember?
Phoenix.
Oh yeah, Phoenix.
Yeah,
that was it. Yeah.
Standing outside of Joe Arpaio's tent city.
Yeah, at 110 degrees. Yeah.
And I get to brag a little bit about Kathy. I'm formerly on the UUA's nominating committee. So just before I went off, I did 6 straight years with them. I co-nominated Kathy to the board. So thank you very much. Yeah, totally. So I was thinking, I have a new friend. His name is Robert Martinez. Robert is indigenous and Latino. He lives in Wyoming, and I'm a fellow of the Intercultural Leadership Institute. It's a year-long fellowship led by First Peoples Nation. And I just wrapped up my year in May. So we talked a whole lot about the economic inequity and equality on the reservations. And I do my research. I do a lot of research. I had known some stuff about the reservations and how poor they were, but until some of the indigenous folk, the Lakota folk, there's a Cherokee woman, and Robert is, I forget his particular tribe, but once they got into the depths of that inequity and equality, it brought my understanding to another level. And you can see it. We were out in the Badlands and trekked through Lakota territory out there, and you can definitely see the poverty. You can see it. And I know in a lot of this country, a lot of us black folk live, pretty badly, are very poor, but it's on a different scale on the reservations. Yeah. And then you talk about the alcoholism, the suicide levels because of the economic inequity or racial inequity and inequality. And it
Cultural devastation.
Say it again.
Cultural devastation because of the
That's exactly what it is. Yeah. Yeah, so but what I love about Unitarian Universalists is that we're working very hard at these issues. We're addressing them. We're not being silent. Even if there might just be a few of us that are, we're at least working continuously to address these issues. And I feel very fortunate to be a part of that. I write about it in my poetry, my sermons or homilies, and I'm always trying to have proximate conversations with somebody who I might meet on the street or at the airport about these issues. And people seem pretty open these days about having these conversations. The only folk that won't really have those conversations are the federal agents at the airport. They're there to do their job, and they'll let you know that. Dude, I can't talk about that right now. You seem like a nice guy, but I can't talk about that. I got a job to do. So I'll move on. I like to ask questions. But I understand. I met a woman, I was heading back from Spokane, Washington. I was there for General Assembly this summer. And I met a woman at a gift shop at the Spokane airport. I think she was the manager or supervisor of that shop. And her and I had a very proximate conversation about the economic inequity or the racial inequity or inequality in Spokane, Washington. I had heard a tiny bit about it, but she got deep. And I'm, wow. And she's from California, so she had a different perspective, but she saw it. She was conscious and aware. So I was glad, not only was, it was my last day being in Spokane at General Assembly, but it was a nice way to have that proximate understanding before I went back home to Rockford, where I'm from. So I love it when people can open up themselves and have those conversations and share that information. Even if they work at the checkout counter or something, people are ready and willing. I found it in Memphis. I found it in Spokane. I find it in Minneapolis. I find it just about everywhere I go. And I think I show people that I'm really interested. I'm intrigued. I want to know. I'm not just there to say I'm into social justice and brag about it. I really want to know. And I'm glad that people understand that and are willing to have that conversation. David, and this makes me, and Teresa, makes me think about the average Joe here in Minneapolis and your outings. How quick are they to have a conversation about inequity or inequality?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I really, well, of course, we travel in liberal circles, so I mean, I think most people want to change in some way. I mean, certainly the people who come here, are dedicated to having the conversations and sticking with it. I guess one thing that I've noticed is an age difference. Of course, I was alive in the South during the Civil Rights era, and a lot of us older people thought we fixed it, right? And often white liberals thought they fixed it, right? And, and kind of like, we did that,
yeah,
right?
We did it.
Yeah, and that mythology just stayed in until fairly recently. Again, it's sort of like the suppression of secular free thought among African Americans. It's just I mean, I lived in Mississippi when the civil rights movement was happening, and I mean, you have to think about how brave it was. I mean, this is a rural state. African Americans were stepping up to fight a system where if the sheriff shot you, there was nothing. There were no laws essentially to protect black people, and people living 2 miles from their nearest neighbor. I mean, this was dangerous. And then we white liberals would go down there and hang out for a while. Well, we weren't going to get shot, seldom anyway. But in the people in the South, I mean, wow, just wow. And the bravery that took is just amazing.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and so I think that mythology of the white savior, unfortunately, has been part of liberalism, and is certainly hard to root out among older Unitarian Universalists. And we really need to get over ourselves on that, because it was not our guts that drove the civil rights movement. We just hopped on board. But and so I think we've been through kind of two waves of anti-racism work in the UUA in the last 25 years or so. The latest one with white supremacy has been more difficult, I think, for white liberals maybe to embrace. But I think people are coming around to understand that there are systems in place that simply work invisibly. It's a background program that just runs racism. And I think we're finally, maybe some of us are seeing it, I hope, because that's what has to be stamped out if anything's going to change.
I told David and Teresa this story not too long ago, maybe even this weekend. I was at General Assembly last year in Kansas City, and I'm at a table sitting by myself, and I have my cell phone with me, and it looked like I was just totally oblivious to everything that was going on. So these two white men come sit down at my table, and my friend and our current president, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, had just talked about white supremacy and how the UUA is going about addressing it right now. One white dude was very vocal. He said, I didn't come here to hear that, man. and he was talking to the other white dude, and I'm sitting right there, right? I'm like just two or three seats from them, and I guess dude didn't care if I was listening or not. And the other dude just sat there. He was just listening. He didn't say anything, but the other dude just went on. And, yeah, I didn't come here to hear that. I think he was mad. Yeah, white guy. Yeah.
To another black man?
Another white guy.
But at the same table.
Yeah, but,
yeah, at the same table with me.
Yeah.
Maybe the dude was thinking, oh, he ain't paying attention. He ain't lying. But I could hear him. And so I'm thinking, man, this is what some people like him are thinking in our faith movement right now. And we can't just be comfortable and think that a lot of us UUs aren't thinking like that. There are some still out that are thinking like that. And Kathy's on the board. Kathy knows. Yeah, so we can pat ourselves on the back and say we're doing this and doing that when there's still some folk who are out there, Unitarian Universalists, that are saying things like that. And what I love about Susan, and I see her on stage, she's very forthright in saying that we're not here for that. Our faith is not for that. Look at our 7 principles. We're not here for that. And what I was telling some colleague is that people like that guy, he'll be left behind and we'll be forward moving and he'll be a part of the old guard when we've shifted and moved to a different paradigm. That's what I can see for Unitarian Universalists right now. Yeah.
Hope so, anyway.
Yeah, at least there's hope.
Yeah, there's hope. Yeah.
Steve, did you want to say something? Or you? No? Oh, okay. Awesome. So.
Well, I decided if Black Lives Matter, they matter when they're alive. So I've subscribed to the Minnesota Spokesman Recorder, the oldest black newspaper in the Twin Cities. Mm-hmm. So I'm reading the names of people who are, this one's in a church thing, this one's a business person, this one's a lawyer, getting the names and seeing the faces in the paper. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, in an organization, the countering racism is to know your person of color next to you and be able to say, well, this one should be the chair. That one should be the treasurer. To be able to know them enough to know that that's true. Mm-hmm. You're not just winging it, you're knowing that it's true. Yeah.
That's important. Thank you for saying that. When I was on the UUA's nominating committee, of course, we're nominating folk to serve in particular positions. And aggressively and increasingly, we've been working on nominating folks of color to positions like the UUA treasurer or secretary. So, we had to look at people's resumes and see what kind of background they have. And of course, being a person of color, that was important, but also what did they do in their work life, work history to make it that far? Yeah. And when you give people's resumes, especially if you're sitting on a panel of 8 to 9 or maybe 10 people, or maybe a little less, you really get to know the inner workings of the UUA and what some of these leaders have done or what they haven't done, and that's important. So I remember we had a discussion about mentoring. I think I'm at a level now where I can mentor young people, or younger people. I'm 45, younger people of color who can, raise to that level and serve in those positions once they submit their application. So it's a part of my duty as a leader in the UUA to help foster development and growth in people of color who are applying for positions. And I'm fortunate to be on that level at this time. So I'm thinking ahead now, if there are young people of color who are approaching me and saying, Christopher, I saw that you were on a nominating committee. What would it take for me to get to apply for the board or to be the UUA secretary or our treasurer? I have information. Or president. I have the knowledge and information and understanding to help me to get that far. So,
you were mentioning when we were talking yesterday, people might like to hear about your experience of going into a UU church for the first time there in Rockford, Illinois, and just and kind of you were expressing like that was pretty darn difficult.
Yeah, well, they brought a guy named Clifton. I call him either one. we're friends on Facebook now. They brought him in from Connecticut, and he was talking at the UU Church, and it was actually with the Rock for Peace and Justice group, and I was meeting with them weekly at the church, and yeah, they brought Clifton in to talk about the so-called war on drugs. And I had been reading about it, studying about it just before that, so I was pretty vocal that evening about what was going on and what was being said, and Clifton is a black guy from Connecticut. So a guy named Jim Parrish, he's now the Reverend Jim Parrish, I should say that, Rockford, Illinois. Jim approached me after that meeting and said, hey, would you like to come check out this church? I think you might like it. And I did. And I've been in UU for almost 20 years now.
All right.
Yeah, rocking and rolling.
Yeah. But you were the only white person. You were only a black person in an all-white church, right? When you joined, or
I think I was when I joined that church back in 2001. I was one of at best 4 people of color in that church, and the Rockford church is kind of big. Yeah, so yeah, in progressive spaces, my voice is still one of just a few. Yeah.
Can I ask about the term Minnesota Nice? Nobody's brought that up. And I think it's a meaningless term. The only state that has a phrase like that, and I don't think it means anything. I think it
you don't think we're nice? Come on, we're nice. No.
No.
Well, no.
It's meaningless.
Well, I think a lot of outsiders sense it as passive aggressiveness, shall we say? It's
And I've heard that term, but I don't know. I can't serve it any justice because I haven't been here enough to understand the history, or maybe in recent experience. It's hypocritical.
Mm-hmm. Well, somebody told me when I moved here that you're not a Minnesotan until someone invites you to their cabin. And we talked a lot about that, how many people of color are asked to come to your cabin. And that's, again, you see these deep systems that serve to perpetrate racism, right?
And for the record, I have not been asked to come to anybody's cabin.
Neither have I.
I'm not sure I have.
You haven't either?
Oh, really? I finally did after about 6 years here. Yeah, finally, yeah.
I've been here for 35 years, and I'm pretty sure I'm not.
Well, you're not a Minnesota.
No, I'm a Wisconsinite.
Christopher, could you please address the issue of predominantly white progressive organizations and African Americans, and there's like this wall between them?
Thank you. You know what I'm prepared to say about that is that I'm a student of the very recent reparations movement, and I think what's your name, sir?
Kim Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. So historic Georgetown University can make history when they offer reparations to the descendants of the slaves that they sold a long time ago, 20 slaves, to keep them afloat. So it's that huge wall. There are dozens and dozens of universities and insurance companies and banks especially that hadn't it not been for this country, period, but if we're talking about economics and a wall or inequity, there are dozens and dozens of those kinds of institutions that built that wall early on when it comes to having a proximate or equitable relationship with people of color, especially blacks, and their existence. And even some of us are doing business with these places, right? Even myself, I'm pretty sure somewhere in my future, I'm currently working on some insurance now in a particular way that I might be working with an insurance company or agency that built this money off the existence of slavery on the backs of black folk or indigenous people. So it's that wall that was built early on, the roots or foundations of this country that makes that possible. And it's interesting, right? So, I look at some commercials where they've hired some black people or people of color to make a commercial when you exist because you might have enslaved this person's grandmother or grandfather. We're wrapped up in so much that it makes it, it's almost, and much respect to the people fighting for reparations, but it's almost impossible to create an equitable or equal situation between people of color and corporations in this country because these companies, corporations, or organizations have made money in ways that have been very damaging to people of color. And they're saying we're owed trillions of dollars. The zillion or man, I mean, yeah. So, and I don't know what we can do spiritually or in a very grounded way that will help knock down that wall. But at least people are trying, and I want to thank Minnesotans for working very hard in this work. I know there are other states and cities that I can think of that are working pretty hard, but I think Minneapolis and St. Paul, I thank y'all for at least trying, because there are a lot of people out there that aren't. Yeah. Like in the Deep South, and I don't want to disrespect anybody, but I own this Lamborghini because God said I should own this Lamborghini. Yeah.
So it's one thing, I mean, I love to learn history and I love to understand it, but we can get so caught up in the quote-unquote shame that we don't do anything about it. So what do we do about it?
About the shame?
No, let's get rid of the shame. Let's actually do something.
Do something.
Yeah.
The first thing that jumps into my head is support Black-owned or people of color businesses.
Yeah.
First and foremost. Even though I spread my money around to different businesses and whatnot in Memphis, this necklace came from a Black guy who's selling African art, Afrocentric, metaphysical art in downtown Memphis. So I put money in his pocket. Actually, this didn't come from him, but a Black woman who owns a shop in Memphis. I went to her tent at the Cooper Young Festival that just happened not too long ago, and I want that. Let me buy that, and I did. So one of the most important things that we can do is buy Black or buy people of color owned things. If you own a business or an organization, hire people of color. That's helpful. If you have an opportunity to mentor a person of color, a Black child, tutor a young person of color, a Black child, do that. Support the local Black Lives Matter chapter. I know it's super active here. Things like that really help.
Thanks for listening. You can find much more about humanism and what's happening at First Unitarian Society in Minneapolis by visiting our website at firstunitarian.org.